Hi there, fellow loom knitters. Ever struggled with a cast on that was too loose, too tight, or just didn't look right? A good cast on sets the foundation for the whole project, and today we're focusing in on several cast on methods, when to use them, and why. I've chosen 6 different cast on methods to share with you today, plus one that I didn't really have a name for, but I like the results. So stick around for that one. I'm going to be asking for your help to solve the mystery. What's it called? Today, I'm going to show you each cast on method, as well as how to produce them and when best to use them. By the end of this guide, you'll have a go-to method for every project that you start. Now, there is quite a bit of overlap with the different cast on methods. So if you're following a pattern, use whatever the designer has chosen for you, because that's probably going to work well and best for that piece. But otherwise, knitter's choice. Once you've watched this video all the way through, I encourage you to use this video as a reference guide. By highlighting the progress bar below on your screen, you'll notice that I've labeled all the chapters accordingly, so you can easily find the cast on method that you're most interested in. As we move forward, you'll notice that all of my swatches are on a flat panel. I've created them with a 2-peg garter stitch edge, and that was just for my convenience. If you're using, if you want to use the cast on method in the round, I actually touch on that as well. So not to worry, I've got you covered. The first cast on method that I'd like to zero in on today is the double E-wrap. Granted, it is the first cast on method that we all learn, but in addition to the double E-wrap, I've added 3 variations. I've color coded my loom so that the black elastics represent the double E-wrap that we all know. And then the first 4 pegs are going to be an E-wrap with a true knit, and the second set of pegs, the pink elastic, is going to be an E-wrap with a purl stitch, and then the last set of pegs is a green elastic, and that will be the E-wrap with a U-wrap involved, and then of course the double E-wrap on the end. There's a little bit of a trick that I had to deal with though when doing this, so let's take a look. You'll notice that the first and last sections links are representing the edges. The first 4 pegs will be blue, the second 4 pegs will be pink, and then the final 4 pegs will be green. The first peg with my slip knot indicates the first, or represents the first E-wrap. So I'm going to E-wrap that one again because I'm going to double E-wrap my edges. So there's my second peg of the first edge. True knit that second yarn from behind. So yarn from behind for the E-wrap, yarn from behind again, and then a true knit. Combination of the E-wrap on the bottom and then the true knit as the second stitch. And that's those 4. Moving to the next section, it's yarn from behind for that first E-wrap, and then we're going to purl stitch this time. So yarn from behind again, and then a purl stitch. So 2 yarns from behind. So we are wrapping it, I guess, twice, but that second stitch is a purl stitch. Then when we finish the purl stitches, I did learn that I can't actually E-wrap and U-wrap right away, so I had to E-wrap all 4 of these pegs complete my 2-peg garter stitch edge, but of course this is a double E cast on for those 2 pegs. I slip my first stitch on the return bout, and I purl that one because it's a garter stitch edge. So now I'm in my first section, or the U-wrap section. So I'm just going to knit over these 4 pegs. Next up, I'd like to show you what it looks like from behind. So we've got the 3 sections, the double E's on the end, the U-wrap with the green elastic, and you'll see how that's quite tight, and then the purls that are looser, and you can see the purl bumps there. and then onto the blue section. This was my true knit section, if you recall. And you can see the varying tension at this point in time, but you'll see it better on the completion. So here we have the completion of the E-wrap variations, and I've stuck extra elastics in so that you can actually see the difference in the tensions, matching it up with the loom. But the blue, as I had mentioned earlier, was the true knit with the E-wrap, and you'll see it's a decent cast on. The pearls is significantly looser, and you can actually see the purl bumps a little bit. And then when we move over to the green section, because if you remember, I actually did the greens and then had to go back, the green section is tighter. The tension is tighter on that one. So just to give you an idea. In regards to taking this cast on and putting it in the round, you're going to complete your full circle, if you will, and because each peg has already got 2 stitches on it, you're going to continue in whatever stitch that your pattern calls for or that you've selected and continue going around. So you're going to close the loop when you've come full circle. It's as simple as that. So that was the double E-wrap cast on and 3 variations. You'll probably have noticed that all of the variations were significantly stretchy. They were all very loose and flexible. So those cast-ons, that cast-on, I'm going to lump them all together, are relatively easy to do. They are forgiving, incredibly stretchy, which is why we use them for hats and scarves. If you wanted a little bit more structure, I would go for the E-wrap with the U-wrap on top, so the green section. That's the one I'd lean towards because it keeps you from getting too loose, if you will. Let's move on to the true knit and the purl cast-ons. I've actually combined these 2 cast-ons in a 2x2 rib format. So let's take a look. So taking a look at how I've set up my loom for the 2x2 ribbing, the edges, of course, are the black elastics, and they are not part of the pattern. Pink elastics represent the purl stitches. The blank pegs will be the true knit stitches. So there's my slip stitch. I'm going to treat this one. Actually, I'm going to purl it because I'm going in this direction, and that's just usually how I do a garter stitch. You'll notice I took the loop, so my yarn's in front, grabbed the loop, placed it on the next peg, but I put my yarn in back before I placed it. So bring the yarn forward. This is a blank peg. This is a true knit. So the yarn goes in back, and then the loop gets placed on the next peg. Bring it around, true knit, but the yarn goes in back, and then the loop gets placed on the peg. Same with the pink. So now it's a purl stitch because it's a pink elastic. So we're going to pull the loop out, yarn in back, and now the new loop gets put on the next peg. And we're going to go that way, alternating 2x2 all the way across until the end of the row. So I've sped up the camera a little bit to get through the row, but if this was being done in the round, you would continue the pattern until you came full circle, and then you just continue knitting with your ribbing 2x2s or whatever your pattern would be. Next, I wanted to take a look at the back side, and you'd be able to see where the pink and the plain ones are. So you've got the pearls and the true knits, and there isn't a big distinction from this side. However, when you look at it once it's completed, and you'll notice I did the ribbing all the way up on the swatch here. So I kept the pearls in the pearls and then the knits in the knits. When you look at the actual bottom of the cast on, nothing spectacular, no big shakes, But when you look at it straight on from the pattern, it's got a clean, crisp edge because all the stitches match, and it's super stretchy. So I can see this type of cast on being used for cuffs, hemlines. So if you're doing a cuff to shoulder sleeve or a bottom up sweater, that's where I'd be using this particular one because it is so stretchy. And that stretchiness accommodates the ribbing. Now let's take a look at the chain cast on and the crochet cast on back to back. Because both of these cast ons use a crochet hook, they are often confused. In fact, I used to confuse them myself. Guilty. Let's take a look and see the differences. Chain cast on. You've got your slip knot on the edge. It uses the crochet hook as mentioned. You want something that's got a decent hook to it, as well as something small enough that's going to easily fit between your pegs, because when you grab the yarn with that quality hook, you're going to pull it through and bring it around the back, creating the loop on the back. Notice how the yarn doesn't actually go over the pegs, it goes around the pegs. So, and the working yarn is always in front. And when we get to the end of the row, that last loop just goes on the final peg. If this were in the round, it would just go on the next peg. No big whoop. Working yarn remains in front. When we look at it from the back, you can see how smooth that edge is, and it looks like a crochet chain. But when we look at it after it's finished on the completed swatch, you can get a better sense of how polished and smooth this edge is. And it does indeed look like a crochet chain. I'd like to call your attention to the back side. Looks exactly like the front side. Because both posts of the chain are on the bottom, you get a front and back that is completely reversible. So this cast on is used when we want to use a brioche so that we can go back and forth, and it's reversible. And it's very stretchy as well. It's smooth, polished. It's a nice cast on. And now onto the crochet cast on. This one, as mentioned, also uses a crochet hook. So we've got the slip knot already on the loom, and the crochet hook again has to have a good hook to it, as well as easy to slip through the pegs. This one, actually, we use the crochet hook to go through the slip knot, grab the yarn from behind, and pull up a loop onto the next peg. So once you get a rhythm going, it's great, but it takes a few tries to get a rhythm going. And you continue pulling up a loop until the end, the last peg. You'll notice right now my yarn is in the back the entire time. When you get to the final peg, you'll see that it's actually, we're going to put the yarn in front. Now again, if you're doing this in the round, you're going to capture the first peg again with the yarn in front. Then when we look at the finished edge on the swatch, you can see it's got a few, it looks kind of a little scalloped, and it is pointed because only one of the V's, one of the posts, is at the bottom. So the other one creates a smooth edge on the right side of the fabric, and it's also quite stretchy. But when you compare it with the crocheted edge, you can see the chain on the chain edge, and the crocheted edge is just one post, whereas the chain looks like a chain and has both posts. So this one, as I said, is smooth, it's clean, a crisp finish to it. And this crocheted cast on is used when we want a crisp, clean edge to our fabric. Up next, the true cable cast on. We're going to begin with the slip knot on the end peg, and we're going to have our working yarn in the back. We're going to wrap it around the front to create a true knit. But now we're going to take that new loop and we're going to put it on the next peg. after we twist it. Yarn goes back in the back, coming around the front, a true knit, a new loop, twist, and put it on the next peg. Yarn goes back in the back, only to be wrapped around again in the front. So this one's got a twist to it, and it's all about the twist. So we're going to repeat that until the end of the row, and if we were doing this in the round, we would come full circle to the beginning, and we would close the project off. So that last peg would become a true knit, fully a true knit, and then we would just continue on in the round. So you'll notice as we finish the row here, it does go to the final peg as a true knit, and the working yarn goes in the back. Now if we look at it from the back side, this cast on edge, it's very smooth and it seems to have a little peak to it. But then when we look at it from the perspective of the completed swatch, we can see that it's got a it's very stretchy, and it's got a scalloped edge to it, and it's very smooth and polished, and it's got that ridge just above it on the right side of the fabric as well. Now if we were to take a look at it and compare it to the crochet cast on, it looks quite similar in that it comes to a peak, but the edges on the cable are going straight across, whereas the crocheted edge is more loopy. So this finish, because it is stretchy and seamless and a little bit decorative, we actually use it for cuffs, so sleeve cuffs or a hemline, I guess. So edges like that we want to have a little bit more bling to it. Top-down socks. It can be used for mittens as well. And that's mostly because it's got a smooth decorative finish. Now we'll move on to the first long tail cast on. The long tail cast on begins with taking your working yarn and measuring it 3 times your project length. So if you're doing it on a flat panel like I am, measure it out 3 times and create a slip knot at the end of that third try, or third pass if you will. If you're doing it in the round, also go around 3 times, put your slip knot on that first peg. So separate your working yarn from your long tail, and the slip knot will count as the first stitch. We're going to just wrap it using the working yarn. We're just going to wrap and knit over that first peg. But when we go on to the second peg, now we're going to take our long tail and create an E-wrap, and then a U-wrap with our working yarn and knit over. So the long tail comes first and it creates the E-wrap, and then the working yarn goes next and creates the U-wrap. And we continue on alternating, kind of like double Dutch. We're going to be alternating all the way along through our pegs. And if we were doing this in the round, like the because now the long tail cast on creates 2 stitches, like the double E-wrap, we're just going to continue on in pattern. So now that we've got 2 stitches on every peg, if we were in the round, we just connect the loop and keep going. We close the circle, if you will. So at this point, I'd like to mention that yes, you could create all the E-wraps with your long tail first, and then collect and follow up with creating all the U-wraps. But I gotta say, that will create a tight edge, and it won't be as neat as doing them individually. So because we're knitting, if we're taking the time to knit something, we're going to want to make sure it's a good job, and we want to do our best. So by creating each and every stitch, every cast on stitch with love and care, we move on. So you can see there's not much of my long tail left when I'm done. Now let's take a look at what the back side is after we've completed our cast on edge. So by looking at the swatch, and we can see the finished edge, It is very smooth and incredibly stretchy because we've used the 2 pieces of yarn, which has given it some pull. It's got a nice polished, sturdy edge, and when we compare it to the chain cast on, it's also stretchy. The bottom doesn't sit as sturdy as the chain, but it is a nice balanced edge and with lots of elasticity. It's often used for flat panels, blankets, and structured garments. And now for our mystery cast on. It has 3 steps, and I've heard it referred to or said it's similar to a tubular cast on. I don't think so. And I've actually heard it called a German cast on. In my mind, it's a twisted long tail. But I want to hear from you. What do you think it should be called? Or what do you know that it's called? Because, hey, I'm sure it's called something. Let's take a look. So this mystery cast on, because it is a long-tailed cast on, also you count your yarn 3 times. In fact, we're going to go a little bit extra, and that's where we're going to put our slip knot. Now the slip knot in this case is not part of the cast on row, so we're going to put it aside just to anchor it, and we're going to separate our long tail from our working yarn. And like the other long tail cast on, the long tail creates the E-wrap, and now we're going to pull it out, give it a twist, and put it back on the peg. And then we're going to create our U-wrap with the working yarn. So let's see that again. Long tail creates the E-wrap. Give it a tug and a twist. And now we put it back on the peg, ready for that U-wrap from the working yarn. And we'll work this right the way down the line. And if this were in the round, we would treat this just as if it were a double E-wrap. So we will have, once it's completed and come full circle, we'll just continue on in pattern. And you'll see what I mean at the end, because even though I've got a long tail now, it uses up most of the yarn, and you'll see it get down to the nitty-gritty, and I have a little bit of a challenge at the end. So here we are at the end, and let's take a look at what it looks like behind. Look how thick that is. And because we've got 3 steps, it has created quite a bit of volume on here, and you can actually see and count 1, 2, 3 the steps in there. And when you take a look at the swatch itself, it's not as neat as I'd like. However, that twist gives it the extra stretch. So it is incredibly stretchy, and I suspect that's because that extra twist creates that extra stretch. So if anybody has seen this before, hey, put a note in the comments below, because I would love to know what this is called, and help me solve the mystery, because this right here, this is where we level up together. And if anybody's kind of curious as to what that little loop is hanging off to the side, that's what happens when you don't remove the slip stitch early enough in your project. It gets trapped and it's hanging out there. Hello! So this cast on has a really strong balanced edge and has even more elasticity than the previous long tail. So it looks like it would be good, in my opinion, on blankets, scarves, hats, shawls. Oh, it would be great on shawls. Now that we've looked at several cast-on methods today, you'll know which one to choose and when, so that your next project will be just right. Consider this a reference guide and visit anytime you like. This is in no way a full list of all the cast-ons that exist. There are specialty cast-ons that are used specifically for certain projects. For example, the Kitchener cast-on. That's primarily for toe-up socks. Now, I'm going to be taking a closer look at specialty cast-ons and I'll be saving those ones for a separate series coming up. You probably noticed that all of my swatches had lifelines. That's because these cast-ons need bind-offs, and I'll be creating that video next, so make sure your notifications are turned on. Until then, I'm Stacey from Stitches by Stacey. Thanks for watching.